Good evening. I want to thank everyone that's tuning in, and for people that are going to tune in later. I'm so excited that I have Ashwani Jain, and let me tell you guys, I'm a big fan of Ashwani. Like, he is amazing. I watch him on Facebook and I watch him on all social media, and I'm like, this guy is like cool. And so I had to ask him to be on my show, and so I'm excited you're here, and I cannot wait to for us to have this discussion. So thank you so much. If you want me to call you Ashwani, you want me to call you Mr. Jane, what do you want to be called? You let me know.
Nope, Ashwani's fine, but no, I'm super happy to be here.
Perfect. Yay. So, Mr. Ashwani, you are 32 years old. You're a Maryland native, cancer survivor, and the son of immigrants. You're a small business owner, and you're a product of Maryland public schools. I love public schools. So I'm happy about that. You have experience working in the public and private nonprofit sector, and you worked for the former President Obama. Like, I'm trying to get where you're trying to get, where you've been. So one day I'll be in DC somewhere. So, and that was with the housing and urban development. So I'm going to let you tell the audience a little bit about yourself, and then we'll go from there.
Awesome. Well, I really appreciate it. And I love the energy, and I love, public servants like you just trying to reach out to more people. So it's a mutual respect. But yeah, I'll just tell you a little bit about myself and why I'm running for governor. And then, well, I'd love to have the conversation. But yeah, my name is Ashwani Jain. I use he, him pronouns. I am 32. I'm a cancer survivor, son of immigrants, product of Maryland public schools. I have worked in the public, private, and nonprofit sectors. And as you mentioned, I did get to work for then President Obama on his campaigns, in his White House, and then in 2 federal agencies. And honestly, I'm running for governor to make our politics more inclusive and accessible. That's kind of the core of my campaign and a lot of what I'm working towards. We have one of the largest grassroots campaigns in the state of Maryland because they understand that we're giving them a real seat at the table. And that's why, unlike other candidates, we're fully accessible because 100% of our events are free. Unlike other candidates, I'm fully accountable because 100% of our campaign is also run by residents from every single age, background in each of our counties. And unlike other candidates, I'm fully transparent because we shared the most detailed and comprehensive policy agenda since last January of 2021. And, because we have an open governor seat, I think, and, you're probably speaking with residents and voters like this too, people want to know that they're being respected, that they're being valued, and they're having access to a candidate who is also tackling issues in a comprehensive way. So I'm happy to be here, and happy to have the conversation.
And I'm totally with you with the grassroots. I agree. I think a lot of the voters and Maryland residents are looking for something different, and so we cannot keep voting in for people that are like just the status quo. Like, we gotta step outside of that and make a seat at the table for young, vibrant minds. Now that I talk about young, vibrant minds, you might be the youngest candidate running for governor right now out of all the candidates. And I see that you ran in the past. And out of those 4 years, growth has happened. And tell me, what would you be your biggest growth and why you feel you can move Maryland forward as a governor?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yes, I would be actually the nation's youngest governor and the nation's very first millennial governor. But what I always tell folks is, even though I'm young, I have the experience and perspective needed to serve the office of governor well. I've helped manage the political appointee process in the Obama White House. I worked on affordable healthcare issues when I was at the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. I worked on affordable housing when I was at the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. And I also helped get the NIH and the FDA billions in additional revenue when I was then Vice President Biden's Director of Outreach for a program called the Cancer Moonshot. And then equally important, which I think is critical, is I have lived experiences that can really relate to Marylanders across the state. I'm a product of Maryland public schools. I'm a son of immigrants and minority-owned small business owners. And I'm a cancer survivor who knows what it feels like to be written off or have others make decisions for me instead of with me.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why we've decided to run our campaign in a way that's 100% crowdsourced, and why I really think decisions about us should not be made without us. And the last thing I'll say on that particular note is, whenever you talk about any issue, whether it be reproductive justice, criminal justice, climate change, housing, healthcare, education, or even economic development, if residents are not included from day one, then none of those policies are going to be equitable. Mm-hmm. And we have seen this time and time again in every single election cycle. And so that's where my campaign is hoping not only to win this election, but really change the way in which our politics in the state of Maryland operates.
And so, yeah, you did answer some of my questions. You're doing really well, because I wanted to know, when you are on the campaign trail, do people challenge your age, and how do you counter that when they do challenge it?
Yeah, it's funny. When I go to some rural areas, there are the conservative or, the Trumpers, I would say, who criticize me for my brown skin and my foreign name. And then in the Democratic Party itself, specifically from leaders and some other candidates, I mostly get criticized for being too young. And, the whole argument to your question is, you're too young, so you don't have enough experience to lead on issues. And, number one, I talk about the experiences that I do have. But then I also mention this. It's funny how politicians or elected officials or leaders of different organizations tell us young people that we don't have enough experience to lead. And yet it's been young people who have led the feminist movement, the labor movement, the climate change movement, and even the Black Lives Matter movement. So maybe it's time to understand that elected experience is not the only kind that matters. And if it was, then residents would still not feel like their voices don't matter. And we would still not be having the same debates over the same issues in every single election cycle. So that's why I go in and I talk about my experiences, and then also talk about the way we're running our campaign and the policies we put forward.
I agree with you. I think that's, I would challenge people that are watching and that are going to watch, we keep voting for the older people, and how's that working out for you? It's not really working out. It's not really working out, right? Because we're actually more divided than we have been in a long time. And so how are you grabbing the young voters? Because a lot of older candidates can't grab that, right? They're still trying to figure out how those young voters, how do we get them? Because a lot of young voters are saying they would rather be independent than Democratic or Republican. So how are you grabbing young voters, and how the young voter, what is your, I don't want to know your secret sauce, but you don't want to tell that, but how is it that you are bringing them in?
Yeah, so the nice thing about our campaign is it's 100% crowdsourced. Everything is open. So there's no secrets that we're hoping through. We've shared our strategy very publicly. And I think that's why we have volunteers, active volunteers on our team that are as young as middle schoolers all the way to those that are retired. And I think the reason is as follows. Number one, because I am personally in a different county each and every day of the week. So actually meeting voters where they are, being the first governor candidate to ever canvass consistently. Number two, we have full and comprehensive policy platforms and policy memos on our website, janeforgovernor.com, which, whether you're young or old, they want to know, are you giving us the same nonsense talking points, or are you actually fully funding your policies and looking at them comprehensively? And then the third big way is, do I matter? A lot of younger people, a lot of people of color, and a lot of folks in rural communities and retired folks, they often feel like unless we have a lot of money or a lot of connections, we cannot talk to a governor candidate one-on-one. And we also can't make policy or strategy recommendations, with no time or financial commitment. And on our campaign, we removed all of that. Every single thing in my campaign is run by residents with, again, no time commitment, no financial commitment, and everyone has direct access to me as a governor candidate. And so I think those are some of the reasons why we've been able to capture not only the interests of young people, but older folks as well, right? Because you do need that partnership. And then the final thing I'll say is using all the social media platforms. I know we spoke about this earlier, but making sure that you have a presence on Facebook, on Instagram, on Twitter, and on TikTok, and finding creative ways to just get the message out, and empower those residents, those young people, to actually help craft and create that content.
And I have to say, I might have to ask you on the sideline, like, how do you do that TikTok? I have a 10-year-old and I still can't figure it out. Like, she's
it
a
took
TikTok
me a little
diva.
while. It took me a little while to get it, but again, shout out to my team of TikTokers who have been able to help out. But it's just like any other platform, right? You gotta learn it, you gotta invest in it, you gotta find people who've already been using it. But then over time, it kind of becomes a little bit easier.
And I gotta say, you guys, he hands down is very he reaches out. Like, I reached out to him and he reached right back. Like, he is definitely saying what he's saying. He's definitely doing it. So, and people can reach you. Now, let's talk about the real topics of Maryland. I read an article not too long ago that Maryland is not a retirement state. People are moving out of Maryland. It's very expensive, and the prices are going up. I mean, here in Frederick, guess what? He's coming to Frederick tomorrow. So I'm excited about that. And here in Frederick, we have a lot of Montgomery County residents moving into Frederick. We have a lot of PG County, Baltimore, and Frederick is the ideal place. I mean, we're 45 minutes from DC, 45 minutes from Baltimore, about 15, 20 minutes from West Virginia, and about 15, 30 minutes, about 15, 20 minutes from Pennsylvania. So we are the location that people are coming to, but our prices in the cost of living is increasing. Yeah. So what would you do as a governor to improve the cost of living in Maryland and make it more affordable? Because I know personally, I have a 23-year-old that cannot afford to live in Frederick. So she has to go move all the way to Hagerstown. And like, we don't, the middle class families cannot afford to live in areas like Bethesda and Germantown and Montgomery County, all those places. They can't afford it. So what are you going to do as a governor to make sure that we can afford to stay in Maryland and grow old here?
Yeah, I mean, it is way too expensive to live in our state and to retire in our state. And so there's two things I would do. Number one is honestly tackle every issue at the same time. We can do it. But I think a lot of times politicians look at issues in silos. When we talk about affordable housing, we don't also connect it to infrastructure. We don't also connect it to economic development and also connect that to education. All these issues are connected. And so if anyone goes to my website, janeforgovernor.com, we have about 150 different policies that are all fully paid for, are able to be accomplished, within the first term, and are interrelated. So that's number one. Number two, to get into some more details, one of our signature programs on the campaign is called the Maryland Now Plan. And the Maryland Now Plan is going to be really historic. It is one of the most progressive plans in the nation because it will eliminate the state income tax for 95% of Maryland workers. Number two, it will make public transit completely free for every Maryland resident. And number three, it's going to create the nation's very first guaranteed jobs program. So just these three topics alone, again, touch on a lot of issues, but will allow more Marylanders to have increased disposable income, more take-home pay, and a reduced cost of living overall.
Talk about that a little bit more. Like, where's the money going to come from? Like, how are you going to get that accomplished?
Yeah, absolutely. I always love to talk about that because, again, when usually candidates, they roll out plans, they never tell you exactly how they're going to pay for it. So if anyone goes to my website to hold me accountable, they go Maryland Now Plan, fully paid for. So when it comes down to eliminating the personal income tax, so essentially, if you are someone in the state of Maryland who makes less than $400,000, that's about 95% of the workforce in Maryland, about 2.9 million folks. I'm going to remove the personal state income tax for you. It will save you an average of $2,000 per year, and that will allow more people to retire in our state and more people and businesses to move into our state. The way we're going to pay for it is in the following ways. We're going to increase the fossil fuel fee, which will bring in a lot of revenue and also help combat the damage done to our climate by the fossil fuel industry, right? So that's connected to climate change. We're going to legalize marijuana while expunging records. That will also bring in a lot of revenue while also improving our criminal justice system. And a big part of this is we're going to increase the sales tax from the 6%, which it currently is, to 7.5%. Now, what we have found is an average Marylander spends anywhere from $600 to $800 a year in the sales tax, but they pay $2,000 a year in state income tax. So we're going to get rid of the bigger tax, have it be fully paid for and funded, and still allow 95% of Maryland workers to have an increased disposable income and take-home pay. So that's the state income tax part of it. When it comes down to making public transit completely free for every Marylander, this will obviously increase accessibility and mobility for students, seniors, those with disabilities, those from low-income neighborhoods, and help us combat climate change while also helping us with economic growth. So right now, our state takes in about $150 million from what they call bus and rail fares. And so to make up for that, we're going to raise the price of a pack of cigarettes from $7.75 per pack to $8.75 per pack. So it's going to fully pay for this plan, and it will also help reduce some of our healthcare costs because right now an average of 7,000 Marylanders die every year from direct related causes to smoking. And it costs our healthcare system upwards of $2 billion. And so we're reducing our healthcare costs, making sure that folks are healthier, and again, making sure that we have public transit that's completely free. So I can get into the Guaranteed Jobs program as well, but I know I've been talking for a little bit. So, but those are, again, some of the ways that we can provide tangible benefits to every Marylander.
Well, you know what, Ashwani, you're a politician, so keep talking. I want to hear some more about that.
Absolutely. Well, so then the other part of my Maryland Now plan is the Guaranteed Jobs program. So essentially, if you are someone who's struggling to find work, this includes veterans, folks from the LGBTQ community, women, people who have been discriminated in the workforce, we're going to have the state government serve as an employer of last resort. So it's a guaranteed jobs in infrastructure, agriculture, childcare, public arts, clean energy. We're going to strengthen the Office of Disability Rights. It's going to pay you more than the weekly unemployment benefit checks that you might get if you're on unemployment, but it's going to pay less than an average job you can get in the private sector or nonprofit sector. So it doesn't compete with anything, but it allows folks to add to their resume, add certain skills, make sure you still have disposable income so you can pay your bills. And if you want to stay in these jobs, you can remain there for however long you want. Or if you want to transition to another job in another field, we'll provide those mentorship opportunities so that we can help not only the state, but also those individuals who, again, are unemployed and just struggling to find work elsewhere.
And if you can put that information in there, I would definitely, the website, I would definitely let people, I will put it up so people can see it.
Excellent.
So now let's talk about, you are a son of an immigrant. And I will say that when I go to other cities in Maryland, they are very diverse. And that is something we're just going to talk about, because when you're coming to Frederick, you want all the counties to vote for you. Now, Frederick in particular, we do have a diverse community. I think the word diversity is going around a lot, but we really don't embrace diversity. And I want to know, if you're elected a governor, how will you improve that support, the safety and living arrangements for the immigration population throughout Maryland?
Yeah, I mean, right. I think the Maryland Now plan, which I spoke about earlier, is going to provide tangible benefits for all communities, even immigrant communities, minority communities, communities who live in low-income neighborhoods, right? Again, making sure that everyone is included by having these issues tackled in a comprehensive way. So I think that's first and foremost. Second is making sure that I, as the chief executive of the state, the person who would propose the budget in the first place, and even on my campaign trail, am including those immigrant voices in senior leadership roles on my campaign, and that I'm actively campaigning in those counties, in those areas, in those neighborhoods, in each county, not taking anyone for granted or not going to a certain area just because they don't have super voters or a huge number of residents who live there and could vote. So again, not taking anyone for granted, I think, is super important. Other than that, yes, I come from from an immigrant family. You know, they weren't political, they weren't well connected. My grandfather immigrated to this country with limited resources, but he found work as a high school maintenance worker to provide for his family and achieve his American dream. My mother went to community college and worked at a nursing home where she made the minimum wage of $3.25 an hour at that time just to pay for classes. And my father, despite being highly educated in India, struggled to find work because of the language barrier. And then after my parents got married, they decided to start a business, but they were always working. So I practically grew up in their store, and I saw how hard it was for them just to keep the lights on in our 2-bedroom apartment. And that story really is the perspective that I bring when I talk to different immigrant communities, because this story is not unique. And so making sure we have increased representation at all levels of government. Back in 2010, I worked and advocated to get the Maryland DREAM Act passed, which would allow Maryland students, regardless of their immigration status, to qualify for in-state tuition. In 2018, in Montgomery County, which is where I'm from, I was advocating to make the county a sanctuary county. As governor, I talk about making sure we limit the influence of ICE within our state. So again, we're having, issues resolved within our state and supporting the residents who pay taxes, who, pay a lot for the services we have, but don't always get the respect that they deserve.
Now, I'm glad you brought up that you're in Montgomery County. So one of the biggest things on my platform is education. Yeah. And making sure that educators get paid enough and that we have a diverse administrative and teachers. And we have a lot of teachers that live in Frederick that commute to Montgomery County because they get paid more.
Yeah.
What would you do to make sure that teachers are getting paid more and that we have a more diverse curriculum and diverse administration, things like that?
I would go the next step and say not only teachers, but educators as a whole, right? Because obviously in the school system, it's an ecosystem. You got the bus drivers, the cafeteria workers, the custodians, you got the whole ecosystem. And so that's where, I talk about my perspective, right? Being a product of Maryland public schools, even attending a Title I elementary school in Montgomery County, which had mold on the ceilings, overcrowded with students, great educators who just didn't have the resources they deserved. And then years later, when I was in middle school and undergoing cancer treatments, really having that entire ecosystem feel like my safe place where I felt supported. And so that's where I talk about easing student debt for educators, reducing the barriers to becoming an educator in the first place and diversifying our educator pool, making sure we're prioritizing school construction funding for low-income neighborhoods, touching on affordable housing so that educators can actually afford to stay in the same area where they're working at, and send their own kids to those schools, making community colleges more affordable and more accessible, moving away from standardized testing to more performance-based testing, and requiring financial literacy credits in order to graduate high school. Again, all these issues, they may seem disconnected, but if you're going to improve our education system and continue supporting our educators, you need to tackle them in that kind of comprehensive way.
So the Carowin Blueprint, Maryland, that is a big topic. As we know, Hogan was not very supportive, and he put all the weight on the political, the officials to figure out how to come up with money. Do you support the blueprint, and how would you move that forward?
Yeah, of course I support the Maryland blueprint, and I'm happy that the Maryland Senate overrode his veto of the bill. And the ironic thing is we actually have the money for these programs. We're even in a budget surplus right now. But the issue is not just having enough money, but it's, are you going to have a governor, a leader who's going to enforce those policies equitably? And if you don't have the lived experiences that can relate to the average Marylander and really respect our public school systems, then these issues are not going to be moved forward. So I advocated with the blueprint with our educators since 2018 in Annapolis. making sure that we protect funds for our public schools and that we keep public dollars in public schools as well. And then as governor, making sure that we continue to enforce it equitably and look at the other issues that I mentioned, which kind of piggyback off of the blueprint that was set by the bill that was overrode.
So I mentioned that you're going to be in Frederick. Where are you going to be at in Frederick?
Yeah, so if you go to my website, you can see my entire schedule is public. I have a mobile office in Monrovia, and so people can stop by there. Every day, 10 to 11 a.m., I'm in a specific park where people can just come very casually to meet me, have a conversation, share their concerns. But then the remainder of the day, I remain in that county, and I'm just kind of all over the place, meeting with residents, meeting with voters, canvassing as well. So if anyone is not able to make the 10 to 11 a.m. office hours, send me a note through the email, through any of my social media platforms, and I will make the time to meet with you in some way or another, because I want to make sure everyone gets their questions or concerns addressed directly from me.
Well, you definitely got to come to the city. So
Absolutely.
You got to come downtown. So it is definitely going to be, and I'm hoping, I'm sending the invitations for Saturday downtown in Frederick. So that might be something you might want to skip down here and have lunch or something, because we will be having First Saturday, and the Democratic table is always set up and for Saturdays on the block of 7th Street. And so you can meet a lot of voters during that time. So that's just a little plug if you want to just swing by and to meet some voters and meet the Democratic Central Committee, because that's who mans the table. So now let's talk about COVID. It's a big topic. We know that a lot of Maryland has thrown a lot of money into COVID, and now COVID's numbers are dropping, and we dropped the mask mandate. I have a feeling that I don't know if that was a good choice, being that we're just numbers are starting to drop, or they have dropped. But if we take those masks off, what could happen? Will it increase the numbers? I'm not a healthcare person. I have not gathered all that data, but I do know that mentally and socially, people are tired. And I think that's something that we definitely need to focus on, is making sure that we can recover from 2 years of COVID. And how would you do that as a governor to move Maryland forward to recovery and making sure that we get back to some normalcy?
Yeah, isolation sucks. I always share my struggles with mental health and anxiety and depression and times when I felt suicidal. No one likes to be cooped up, and, everyone hates talking about COVID and all these restrictions, but more people hate seeing their loved ones die because of COVID. It is when science kind of comes into the conversation, we need to follow that. And so as governor, and even as a governor candidate, I've been advocating since I launched my campaign for vaccine mandates. And until a majority of our residents are fully vaccinated, then we have a mask mandates. Now, I agree with you in terms of the concern of removing that mandate for masks right now. I hate wearing masks, but I know it keeps me safe. It keeps people around me safe. And this is still a very contagious virus. And I want to make sure that, just because the rates are going down, we don't tick back up. And we saw this over the last 2 years. As soon as the rates ticked down, we got a little carried away, and then we had to shut down everything. So it also hurts our economy as well. So I would put those mandates in place, making sure that organizations, businesses, schools have the PPE resources they need as well. Making sure that if we are, moving to virtual learning or hybrid of any sort, if that's what the science tells us is safest, then we have to provide equal access to broadband, because that is not always given, especially based on where you live in the state of Maryland. And making sure we provide different tax credits and relief for businesses, for example, just to make sure they don't lay off or fire any of their employees because of this emergency. It also touches on housing, making sure we provide immediate rental relief so that people are not being evicted, especially during times of crisis. So these are some of the approaches in which I would take, but it starts with looking at the science, not being too quick to react, and then again, tackling these issues in a comprehensive way and providing those resources when they are needed.
Now, we all know that people are very right now. They don't care about what you're going to do 3 years from now. They care about right now. So, if you were elected, what would you do in your first year of office? What would you like to accomplish? What is your three top priorities you would like to accomplish, and how would you accomplish it?
Yeah, you know, one of the things that I always tell people is if you go to my website, each of those 150 policies that I've put forward, including the Maryland Now plan, which I spoke about earlier, those are all able to be done right now. They are looking at issues both in the short term and long term. So we can do it all. And the way to do it all is by, as a candidate, being transparent from day one. I can't tell you how many other candidates and how many times I've heard politicians say, oh, here's the 2-sentence talking point that you can find on my website. Once I'm elected, then I'm going to engage different stakeholders. Then we're going to see how we're going to pay for these solutions. That gets into a mess. And we've already seen that strategy fail. That's why since last January of 2021, when I kicked off from day one, we have every single policy in very full and specific detail and fully paid for listed on our website for anyone and everyone to see. And each and every policy was made by residents who were going to be impacted by those policies, not consultants. So when you engage constituents, then as governor, when I am proposing the budget and when I'm working with state house members and state senate members, I already have their constituents on board for my legislative agenda and priorities. So yes, I can work well with legislators, but just in case some of them decide to have an ego, we got their constituents who can call them and say, hey, we're your constituents. You represent us. We help make these policies, and we want these policies to be passed.
So basically what he's saying is he's got receipts. So
there you go.
I got receipts, and I like that. So yes. And so tell me, I think you are very progressive. And progressive is let's talk about how we can bridge that gap of there's a divide of like progressive Democrat and then, Republicans. How do you feel about Democrats and progressive Democrats coming together? Because I'm in fear that if we don't, Republicans are in the backseat watching us crumble. And people don't understand how important this election is that will set the tone for 2024. Explain that to me.
Yeah, I mean, again, we're setting the blueprint in our campaign right now. The fact that we have folks who are quote unquote super far left and progressive to moderates and folks who are a little bit on the conservative side or independents supporting this campaign. I think the reason is because I talk about issues in a comprehensive way. I am fully transparent and specific on my website, and everything is fully paid for. So you get the conservatives who might be more concerned about how are we going to pay for these things. And we check the box with people like me, progressives, leftists, on all spectrums, because we're actually able to get things done. I'll give you an example. And this also goes back to the rhetoric that we use. I helped fight for and advocate and help get passed a $15 minimum wage in Montgomery County back in 2018. Now, the typical progressive talking point is it's the right thing to do. That is correct. But when I talk about that issue, I say it in a different way. I say, not only is it the right thing to do, but it also is good for business. Coming from a small business background myself, when your employees have a living wage with affordable healthcare, affordable housing, when they are taken care of, it is going to help your business's bottom line because you're able to retain those employees and they become more loyal and more productive. So that way, I take a progressive issue and I'm also able to bring in folks who are a little bit more on the center or conservative side because of the rhetoric that I'm using and the fact that I talk about how we're going to actually profit off this and help not only the employees, but the employers and vice versa. So I think any of these issues, when you speak about it, whenever people look at how I speak about issues or if they read my website, they'll notice that I have such a broad support because all these residents are contributing themselves to these policies. I'm being comprehensive about it. They're fully paid for. And I'm taking out the rhetoric and trying to get to the actual core of those issues. So we can still get these things done, but we gotta be really strategic and smart about how we're actually proceeding with those issues.
Now, as I said before, later people will watch this and they wondering, how would you want people to help you with your campaign? If they like what you're saying, what would you want them to do to help you with your campaign in different counties? How can
Absolutely. So we have a presence in each of our 24 counties, including Baltimore City. You can go to janeforgovernor.com. We have opportunities to make phone calls from your living room. You can help canvass with me in your specific neighborhood. You can help make policy or strategy with no time or financial commitment. To learn more about that or to sign up, they can just go to janeforgovernor.com, and there are ways that they can sign up. And I'll also mention, any single individual who decides to volunteer with our campaign, I make the time to have a personal conversation and personalize the experience to what their skills are or what their interests are.
So, and I will vouch for that. I mean, I felt like I was getting an email from you and not from like
You are.
so that is good, because when we get with candidates and it's always like their staff or something, I don't know. And so I know people, I tell people they have my personal email, my personal phone number on my literature. So they can actually call me and they're not talking to like somebody else. And I think we need more candidates like that. It's like, you can talk to me and what I want to hear from you. And so, and I like candidates like that, because that means that if they're that personal now, when they get into office, they're going to still be that personal moving forward. And exactly. I think we need more candidates like that. Now, let's just say, now that we're on that topic, when you get busy as a governor, we know you're going to get busy. How would you still connect with the people and making sure that you are still doing what they say? Like, because they want to hold you accountable.
Yep, absolutely. And that's a legitimate concern, right? I'll answer that in a couple of different ways. Number one, because some of the other candidates or some of the other volunteers, from other teams will say, oh, we don't have time. The candidate naturally doesn't have time to speak with every single person. Well, if they don't have time to speak with you on a campaign, there is no way they're going to speak to you once they're elected. So we're really building in that infrastructure now. Number two, you can hold me accountable, because every part of my operation from day one is built by residents, not staff members, not consultants. So when I get elected and when I'm in office, there is no way that I'm going to ignore residents and community members, because everything in my campaign, every part of my operation was built from the first day I kicked off my campaign by those residents, by those community members, by those stakeholders. So I've already put in those accountability measures from day one.
And I think we started our campaign trail at the same time. Because I think we did around the same time. And so now let's talk about, you mentioned Black Lives Matter. I wanted to leave this for the last one. I did not, and you did not have this question in advance. Being that I work within law enforcement. I was working in Baltimore with law enforcement, Black Lives Matter movement, Blue Lives Matter. It was back and forth. Transparency and accountability. That is something that is going on. And we had a big issue with our sheriff department when it came to the 287G. Thank God that's over, and we conquered that. But we still need accountability and transparency. I'm huge on community policing, but what community policing looks like is not going to play basketball with somebody in the community and taking a picture, right? We all know that. But we want to hold law enforcement accountable and still support law enforcement, because I think a lot of law enforcement be like, oh, you want transparency? Now you're taking all our power away. I've heard that side. And I've worked with officers on that side, like saying that we don't have the power anymore. How would you as a governor address law enforcement and our issues?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is something I'm really passionate about. And, again, to hold me accountable, folks can go to my criminal justice policy memo on my website. But here's what I'll say. When Black and brown kids are afraid to go outside and put their hands in their pocket, when they're afraid to stay inside and sleep in their beds, when they're afraid to drive their cars or walk in the streets, then we have a severe problem with our criminal justice system. That does not diminish whatever good work is also being done, but we demand accountability in every other field, so criminal justice systems should be no different. And so that's why my plan, I do tackle the issue comprehensively. Everything from ending extreme sentences for children, ending the money bail system, continuing the end of for-profit prison contracts, finally treating opioid and drug use as a disease, not as a crime, investing in more mental health professionals, helping prepare those who are in prison for life outside of prison, making sure we have independent oversight, legalizing marijuana and expunging records, and making sure that we eliminate the SRO programs in our public schools and instead use that funding for more guidance counselors and social workers within our school systems. So that is the approach that I take. That's the sentiment that I have. And I think that's how we can finally not only keep our community safe, but build that community trust and help not only law enforcement officers, but help our residents, especially those who feel and are discriminated against.
And like I said earlier, we are off camera. We are having a community pop up, and I think that will be a great opportunity for you to come by, because that community pop up will be addressing mental health. It will be addressing behavioral health. It will be addressing substance abuse. We are going to have law enforcement there. We are going to be addressing people with returning citizens and all those aspects that you're talking about, and just seeing how, just getting out in that community and keeping your grassroots. We would love for you to stop by and definitely connect with the community and connect with the people that are doing the work on the ground and in the trenches, because that's what's important. And so I thank you for saying that, because I think a lot of them, you were the first candidate to talk about private money in the prisons, and people don't know like how that is huge in keeping brown and Black and minorities in prison. I mean, it's very huge. I can't even tell you how much top ramen costs in prison. It's very expensive. I don't know, but I've seen it, and so I know that it's costly, and it's a revolving door, right? You have the education in prison base, in how we are already setting our kids up for failure, the Black and brown community, and making and they don't have an opportunity. And I've worked with the returning citizens, and I know how that is, where they're taking all those programs out of the prisons. So how would you keep those programs in prison and making sure that they could still flourish when they get out? Because it's a disconnect. And I think that we need to invest more in that. So how would you do that? Where would that money come from, and what programs would you put into prisons and outside of prisons to make sure that they can return back into the communities?
Yeah, I mean, a real simple way is to actually use the employment services departments at each of our 16 community colleges. Our community colleges have great resources, and there have been some programs scattered throughout the state that I've heard about, but essentially making sure that we partner with these departments to help with job training, resume building, career workshops. So I think that's one part of it. The other part is, preventing discrimination in the housing market, so that a landlord can't discriminate against you if you have a housing voucher, or if you have a veteran voucher or anything else. Making sure employers cannot discriminate against you, by asking you what is your criminal history. And then going back to my Maryland Now plan, making sure that everyone has access to jobs, more disposable income, and a decreased cost of living. So I think, again, when you're really trying to help folks, if you're not looking at it, and I know I've been saying this word too much, but if you don't look at it comprehensively, that's how you see a lot of folks kind of fall in and out of the system, or just not get the support that they need in order to thrive.
Now let's talk about climate change. That is a huge topic. Yeah. It is a huge problem. Yeah. And I've heard people talk about electric buses, electric cars. I've heard so many discussions about these things. Yeah. But when you look at the low-income communities, they can't afford electric cars. They can't afford solar panels on their homes. What are you going to do as a governor to fight climate change and global warming and making sure that everybody can benefit from it across the board.
Yeah, I mean, that goes back to, right, politicians looking at issues in silos. Oh, okay, we got to have more electric cars. That's going to solve the climate crisis. But yeah, you're not addressing the low-income individuals who can't afford that. Like, how are you going to look at this? So that's where, in my climate change policy memo, I start with talking about reforming the commissions on environmental justice and the Public Service Commission so that it has equal representation. No one from the fossil fuel industry is actually serving on those boards. Making sure we invest in more designated bus lanes, expanding MARC train services, making sure as a state we don't subsidize trash incinerators and paper mills anymore, which are still classified as renewable energy sources, even though they are emitting so much greenhouse gas. Making sure we have smart growth. So as we build our towns and our cities, investing in mixed use development, not just single family housing, but multifamily housing, and building areas closer to transit, making transit more affordable, more accessible, making it free, investing in solar as a state. So starting with public schools and the state capital, making sure we have solar panels on those roofs, which will also help us make net zero energy buildings. Making sure we're redeveloping brownfields, which are essentially old landfills that are too polluted to generate revenue or support housing or agriculture or education, but they would be great for solar fields. Making sure we invest in hydropower, in wind power, banning single-use plastic bags, improving our composting facilities. A lot of folks don't know this, but of the 20 or so composting facilities in our state, 14 can't even process food scraps. And they just send that waste to landfills anyway. So making sure we have better regulations, and we, in the meantime, require those facilities to send their food waste to farms before landfills. And then making sure we protect and invest in the Bay. And then a final piece of this is making sure that we hire more analysts so that we can conduct an environmental impact study for any piece of legislation coming out of Annapolis that could impact the infrastructure or our environment. Right now, that is not a guarantee for all those pieces of legislation. I would make sure it is in my administration. So again, looking at all these issues, that's how we can provide tangible benefits, help our economy, help our businesses, our residents, our workers, and really start to turn the tide on our climate crisis, because we don't have too much longer to be able to do something about it.
Now it is time to tell us why we should vote for you. So why should we vote for Ashwani Jain for governor? And not only because you have the cute doggy, which we have the same dog. Why should people vote for you?
Real simply, because I'm running to make politics more inclusive and accessible, which is the core of the concerns that residents have. That's why, unlike other candidates running for governor, I am fully accessible because 100% of our events are free. I'm fully accountable because 100% of our campaign is run by residents. I am fully transparent because we've shared the most detailed and comprehensive policy agenda since last January 2021. And unlike other candidates, we have been able to create a winning campaign with the most volunteers without needing to constantly fundraise.
I love it. So thank you so much for being on my show. I really wish you all the luck in your campaign. And I must say that you are definitely doing your thing on social media. You're doing your thing in the community. And it's time. It's time for a change. I support everything you said, and I think that we need to start changing some things up in Maryland. And I support you in everything you're doing in your campaign. So I wish you all the luck, and I hope to see you in Frederick tomorrow. If not, we can definitely set up something else, and you can come back and we can and eat some good food in Frederick City, because we have some
absolutely. Absolutely. Well,
so
no, I sincerely, just real quick, I sincerely appreciate the platform that you're providing for candidates like us, for the work that you're doing in the community, and for the county. And yeah, I want to stay in touch, and we'll definitely link up afterwards. But I appreciate it, and thanks for everyone who's listening in.
Thank you so much. Have a good night.
All right, thank you.